Okay, good morning, art students. I'm going to talk about the skateboard project today and the different steps you should be taking when approaching your project. Like we've talked about in class, make sure you cut off the ends of your board, find the midpoint, and then go ahead and create a curve down to the side. If you don't have scissors, you can shade the background. You could do this with a marker. And yeah, it shouldn't, don't overthink it. Don't worry about it being perfect, the edges of your board. And then if you can find scissors, you can just carefully cut the edges. And yeah, it's just a matter of cutting those top and bottom corners to create a curved edge. If you lost your project paper, any sort of cardboard would work fine. Next, you want to organize the placement of your different metaphors and objects with pencil. I did this with circle, and I know I want movement going back and forth, so I added some lines. Now, you slowly add details and start to like map in what you're doing. I decided for this skateboard, I just picked a bunch of metaphors that I saw on the mood board. So I don't really have a unifying theme in mind yet, but I saw like people are interested in drawing skulls and soccer balls. And I also wanted to incorporate text. I saw a lot of flowers and moons and suns. So what I'm doing is I'm going to try to combine a bunch of metaphors I'm seeing that are popular, like this soccer ball right here. And I'm going to try to show you guys how to create unity at the end, just to inspire you to get going. I'm starting to think about movement as I do this, meaning I'm drawing lines kind of going up and down. And now I'm thinking about flowers, okay? So if I repeat something like a rose, throughout the board, that might create unity. And what I can do is I can create a mood board to show you guys all my different reference images. Um, but I'm looking at a picture of a rose right now, basically. And if you think back to the beginning of the year, I am using ellipses to kind of make the flower feel sort of round. Notice I'm going really light with my line weight at first, and then I'm working in detail with a darker pencil right here. So, you got to go really light at first and then pull back any pencil markings you kind of like don't need. And simplifying. So I'm adding in the flower right there. So right here, I am really, because drawing a rose felt a little harder and I don't really know how to do it, I'm looking at a picture. Now I'm defining edges, and I'm thinking about different ways to create repetition throughout the board. I have these different metaphors. So if I repeat the rose, that might help to create unity. Now I might come into like an issue later on because I didn't have a draft and a plan with unity, but we'll kind of see how I do. So again, I'm taking the time to repeat this flower right here. And I remember getting a little impatient at this point because I was like, oh, this is taking a long time. But remember at this point, you're just kind of like mapping things out, and you will be putting in more details with the markers, but your pencil work is kind of your plan. And your pencil work keeps you from being afraid when you're approaching the board with markers. Now I, started to repeat circles because the prospect of drawing a rose again and again started to overwhelm me. So I thought maybe if I repeat circles, that will help. Right. This is the other end of the board. I have a soccer ball on one end, and this idea of sun and moon and time was really popular. So I basically found a reference image of a sun and a moon together. And I want on this end of the board, I think, to bring like a lot of joy. Like I got the skull of sadness in the middle, but on this end of the board, I want it to be kind of a very, very happy thing, showing students that, things are really difficult in the pandemic now. It's easy to feel hopeless, but, time is moving, and we're going to get through it together. So I'm kind of sketching in with a light value H pencil, like a 2H. I'm sketching in the face of the moon right here. You know, the sun and the moon showing the times going by. And I'm really just looking at my computer and my mood board, kind of looking at my reference images. Right now, I'm kind of drawing the ends of the sun, and I ran out of space actually, but you know, I'm just going to make it work. So I'm making slight changes, and I'm realizing that the sun rays can kind of help to create movement. So I'm putting in a lot of hatching and cross hatching, and I'm starting to think about the direction that my markers are going to go when I'm drawing. And the marker direction and the hatching creates visual movement, just like, you know, Vincent van Gogh's paintings would. You know, the strokes that I take around the board help direct the eye. Now I'm taking some time to add in more details to the skull. I'm incorporating text now. So I'm thinking like, okay, I'm going to have like words and some kind of message so we could kind of take what we learned from graffiti art. I also, when I'm looking at the other end of the board, I'm realizing that I need a lot more stuff going on this end of the board to create balance, right? I have a lot happening with the sun and the moon. So I decided to put a crown on top of the soccer ball because some people were talking about missing school during office hours. And then I'm just kind of working a message in right here on top of the skull. And I'm thinking if the message starts here and then moves to the right, that'll help to create visual weight. Because I think the sun and the eye will create a lot of visual weight and tension. So I wrote fight for you. And now I'm writing believe. So I'm kind of like sketching that in. I did a curvy line and I'm now carving out the text letters. And that takes time, you know, and patience. And, you know, this board was done in several work sessions. So far, I've probably spent about an hour and 50 minutes on it. And you just really have to be patient with yourself and do it one step at a time. So I'm writing believe in tomorrow here. So I'm carving in the words tomorrow right here. And I did a curvy line, and I'm taking the time to do that. So I'm writing believe in tomorrow. And I recommend this, you know, it's not required anywhere on the rubric to put in text, but it does create kind of like detail, and it might help you to clarify what it is that you want to say and make a strong decision through your art. That's why we do a lot of text incorporation in Art 1, because we're trying to establish that voice. Now I'm darkening edges, and I'm thinking about that skull, and I'm putting in more detail. Okay, now I'm thinking soccer ball. I'm actually looking right now at a picture of a soccer ball because I really don't know what a soccer ball looks like. And I'm working in the hexagon, like little shapes. I think that's a hexagon, 1, 2, 3. Maybe it's a pentagon. But anyways, I'm kind of actually just looking at, thinking I got to add a lot of details if I want this side of the board to be heavy, because the side with the moon and the sun are going to attract a lot of visual attention. So you want, you know, stuff happening on the top, the bottom, and the middle of the board. That's why this is such an interesting design problem. I'm putting in dark value. Remember, dark value creates weight and spatial depth. So the ball kind of is coming out. I'm attracting a lot of attention because I really am shading dark with my pencil, and I'm putting dark value behind. Now I'm thinking, wow, snap. I'm just looking at the soccer ball. So I'm going through, I'm adding more value, and I'm kind of trying to repeat, you know, these circles. I might have a problem with color balance later, but that's, you know, where I am as far as pencil work. And, you know, you have to give yourself a break. So this was after some time. But next, this is so exciting. I started to create an underpainting. And I got this concept of creating an underpainting just by watching YouTube videos. You start with, right now I'm starting with one of the lightest warm grays. You'll see WG, it should say WG, in your marker kit. Or you could do this with like light pencils. But basically, I'm kind of working in values right now. And I'm following a YouTube video, right? And anything that you want to draw, you can follow a YouTube video. Let Mr. Rivera and I know, and we'll find different reference videos. But the more times I'm using the same marker right here, and the more times that I put strokes on top of each other, the darker the value gets. So now I'm taking a different gray. I think actually that was a cool gray. Now I'm adding the warm gray. But you basically want to start light and then go dark. And I'm using the fat tip. Now I'm using the skinny tip. But at first use that broad tip, and you're just kind of helping the eye to understand where the shadows are. And you could do this on anything. You don't have to be drawing a skull, right? So drawing a sphere, drawing flowers, drawing a soccer ball. You could go ahead. You see here I'm using the gray on the edge of my soccer ball right there to try to create, a light source. And now I'm trying to do it on the sun right here. This is the warm gray. I maybe should have used the cool gray. One of my issues is I just grab markers and I don't think too much about my colors. So make sure you give yourself that time. But I was thinking, okay, so if my light source is coming from the right, where would the shadows be? So I'm starting to work that in, and I'm just experimenting, and I'm doing it with the spheres too, trying to establish a consistent light source. And and now I'm doing it with the roses. So I'm moving all over the board doing this underpainting, trying to take the concept from the skull that I learned and then going all over, doing it to the edges of the crown, all these circles that these spheres I'm purposely repeating to create unity. And if you're stuck with what to repeat spheres, repeat triangles, repeat different shapes. But now I'm working in a darker value because I'm thinking, who's going to even look at the spheres? And now I'm going back in with the thinner end of one of the even darker grays, right? So it's really important that you organize your colors by value. And I'm working in darker details. So now I have a dark gray. And you really got to work dark to light. And then you slowly pick out what you think is even more important. Now, do you have to go this far into detail? No. But you have the tools of the markers, right? And if you go from light to dark, you're going to feel more confident with what you're doing. And you're going to feel, less afraid. One thing I want to point out too is notice how much I am rotating the board, right? So, and I'm actually standing for most of the time when I'm drawing. So, often we get kind of stuck, when we're working because we're sitting and we're not moving very much. Make sure that you are moving a lot. Okay, right now I am continuing to add in more detail, and I'm thinking about that movement, right? So by working in the warm grays, I'm thinking that'll help to move the eye sort of around the board. So you can kind of see this repetition of these curvy shapes. So always take the time to zoom out and think about what you're doing. So that was like 45. This is where I think I made a bit of a mistake. And I wouldn't call it a mistake, but I started to work in green on top of the sun. And I think it's okay. I thought it was like a darker yellow, but it really was a green. And, once I pulled away, I was like, oh, damn, that is green. But I thought, you know what, that's fine. I kind of like this kind of bright green color anyway. So I'm going to put it throughout the board. So I'm thinking this green on the left will serve as like a shadow for the sun, and the sun will be mainly yellow. So I'm doing like this green and yellow color scheme throughout my board. Now, let's just emphasize, guys, that it is totally okay for you to make modifications to your board as you go. It does not need to look exactly like your color draft. Art is supposed to, as you're planning it, is supposed to change slightly. Just like life, you kind of adapt to choices. You adapt to things that happen. So it's like, wow, all of a sudden I had green. Instead of freaking out and not finishing, I'm going to kind of work it in. You got to work it in. If you spill something on your design, you got to work it in. So right now I'm just kind of starting to work in color into the text. I am still using the broad tip marker, and I'm kind of still seeing what I'm doing as an underpainting. I know the flower is going to be red or like some warm color. So I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm going to put this warm green, bright green, that's kind of a complement behind the flower on purpose. And now I'm starting to get a little anxious and I'm working in those dark values. You got to do that slowly. I took a break here, stopped, took a picture. But, it takes time. Here I am, I collected all of my reds because I know I'm going to work on the flowers now. And I'm actually watching a YouTube video right now. So I'm kind of watching and I'm starting with pink. Pink is actually red with a lot of white, or a lot of white with red, I should say. And I'm thinking that'll be my light value. One thing I regret with this is I wish I had left more white on the flower for a highlight. Okay, so I'm slowly working in dark values, darker reds. So I purposely kept all of the different markers in the shot so you guys could see that I'm going back and forth between the different reds. When you're drawing something, collect all the colors that are the same color and kind of place them next to each other. So I'm kind of now painting in darker values down at the bottom of the flower. If my light source is coming in from the right of the board, I don't know if I would have a shadow there, but I was thinking that light would be blocked by like leaves or whatever's behind. This right here, maybe I should have made that a green leaf. I was in a hurry. Okay, now I'm using the thin edge, the thin pen. And the thin pen is really, really great for kind of like doing little dots, adding all sorts of little details. The squiggly lines are kind of fun, and that kind of brings the texture that it's a rose, right? But I'm adding different colors throughout the rose to kind of create balance, like actually in the rose. So I have an even amount of dark and light. I'm trying to work in some of the grays and purples. I'm just trying stuff, and I'm not going to worry about messing up. And that's something that's really hard to teach in Art 1 is it's just kind of like, worst thing you can do is to not do anything at all, right? So don't be afraid of creating something that you don't like or you think looks funny. Okay, working in more details with the rose now, trying to repeat that. So like when you're thinking about, well, what visual elements am I going to repeat to create unity? How am I going to create groups? You may want to consider, well, okay, how long is this going to take me to draw? And it should take you a while, but you don't want to pick things that are so hard to draw that you never finish, right? So I'm kind of like wrapping up the rose. I don't know if I'll have patience enough to draw another one of those. And you have to give yourself time. You have to give yourself patience. Now I'm layering in a darker green. And I really recommend putting different colors on top of each other. That's what you're supposed to do with this. That's kind of like a mixing. I'm also thinking about repeating the curved shape of the moon that you see under the sun. I'm actually repeating that shape by putting in that dark value. So I'm kind of repeating this kind of curves, these curved C's with the leaf and stuff. And I'm thinking if I repeat these curvy lines in my choices as I draw things, that will help to bring everything together. So again, totally different kind of metaphors and visual elements. These are the things that you guys put on your mood board, a lot of you. And I'm showing, the lines you put around them and the shape that you draw things in, repeating these curved C's might help me to create unity in the end and make everything kind of work together. Now, here's the trouble with putting in text. It takes a long time. That's why the graffiti art was kind of like its own separate project. But I'm slowly kind of now outlining the text, and, giving myself time to do that. I would recommend looking up spelling, because sometimes when I draw, I make big spelling errors because I'm thinking so much about how something looks. And here I made a big error. I actually thought that was a G, and I wasn't even thinking about what I was writing because I was thinking about color. And I'm stopping, and I realize it's a B. It's supposed to say believe. So should I stop my project and throw it out? No, I'll figure out a way to fix it later. Maybe I'll find whiteout or something in the house. And I'm continuing to, work in those details right here. In the N, and, giving myself time. I'm also breathing deeply. And I really hope I can finish this for you guys. But by now we're presumably watching this in class, you should have like the pencil work of your skateboard done. And you should be working in the color. If you don't yet, start putting in that pencil work, start putting in that detail. And my advice is to just really make decisions and move on. You could always do another version of something if you're not satisfied with it. So guys, what I'm doing now is I'm starting to work in those middle values. I'm finding blues, darker grays, and I'm starting to create shadows. So the beauty with starting with lighter values is then you can slowly work in the details. So really make sure you go light to dark. And I am looking back at that same YouTube video, and I'm putting in little dots. And sometimes, you're going to be off with your color choices and your value choices, and that's okay. This is about learning, right? This project's about learning about, different values, different colors, and how they attract attention. But basically, you need to know as soon as you start adding in colors that have more black, like this dark gray, colors that are darker, it's going to attract attention, right? And it's going to attract the eye. So what I'm doing right now is I am slowly, with the thin edge, adding in detail. Then I'm going back in and I'm grabbing my warmer colors and I'm adding in more details. So notice how I'm moving back and forth between light and dark grays. And that is just something that you need to do and you need to be comfortable with doing. And keep up the good work. So your workspace should have all of your colors laid out, right? You should have all your colors laid out. You stop and organize your colors from time to time so you can make informed decisions. Do you have to draw a skull? No, right? It's just some of you have that on the mood board. So you're drawing kind of with this project, whatever thing you want, always looking back and forth between your reference images, your mood board, and your object. Now, it is very possible that you are looking at your mood board and you're kind of like, wait a second. I don't believe that I have the correct reference images. So right now, I was actually looking up more stuff, right? So sometimes you may have to stop and you may have to find more imagery because you don't really know what to draw or you don't know how to draw it, right? So maybe you have to stop and research from now on again. So often when kids are like, I don't know what to draw or I don't know how to draw it, they skip the research process. They didn't take the time to find images, right? So, make sure you reach out and be like, hey, I'm having trouble with, drawing this, or I'm having trouble with finding an image that looks like, X, Y, and Z, and let us know, and we will look for it. One thing that I'm just learning now is purples and blues, these light purples and blues, they actually make really cool shadows. So I'm putting in the shadows of the teeth, and then I'm putting in those dark details of the teeth. So continuing to put in those details, dancing around, a lot of stippling happening here. I know it doesn't look like stippling, but I'm like lifting up my pen and I'm putting it down, lifting up my pen and putting it down as far as shadows. Okay, I tried to make a bold decision. Now I'm trying to create contrast. So I'm actually thinking, okay, well, what color do I have going on in the skull? And I'm going to layer in the opposite. Then I realized since the skull is mostly white, I'm just going to layer in a darker value on the top side. So I'm creating contrast. And that's what you got to start to do as you're thinking about the background is you got to put in opposite colors. You got to put in opposite values and layer in from there. And when you put opposite values, lights and darks next to each other, or opposite colors, that's when the board starts to look cool. Because the eye is interested in, we like seeing different things put next to each other. I'm putting in a shadow right here. So you have to always like think, how am I going to make my design pop from far away? So yellow is a really light value. And I'm putting in, so that's why I'm putting in a dark value behind. Don't have to have shadows. But again, the similar idea of putting darks and lights next to each other. And that's something you guys got to think about as you're working stuff in. I also am about to get out the black now. Mr. Rivera's talked about this in class. I think it's been really great. You want to reserve black for like when you really need it. And right here, I'm working it in to kind of like help the viewer to understand that this is the opening space of the mouth, and that's the end of the form. So I stopped using black right away because it was really popping, and I use it with reservation. Now I'm layering in some blue, and I'm actually looking back at the YouTube video to create shadow. So I'm thinking I'm going to put this blue in throughout the board to kind of move the eye around. So you want to put notes of colors throughout the entire board as you're working stuff in. So please like keep that in mind. Yeah, and like just make sure you're getting to it. Make sure you're having fun. Now I'm bringing black into the soccer ball. So I'm back with the black. I'm doing like the edges to help understand, okay, well, that's the end of the skull. Now I'm like, okay, black is the heaviest color. I'm going to add black in the soccer ball, right? And that is going to pull the eye from the skull to the soccer ball. I hope this helped, guys. Stay tuned for another video.